In this episode of the Mama podcast, we are joined by Paula and Hazel from the company Laborie, and we discuss how to prepare for premature birth, navigating emotions throughout the prem baby journey, and what to expect in the neonatal unit. Well, welcome to the latest episode of the Mama podcast. And today, my co-host is the lovely Claire Bagley, who is our hospital's relationships manager. And we are joined today by the fabulous Laborie. We have Hazel and Paula here with us today. So over to you, ladies. Please, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your role at Laborie?
Hi, good morning, or whatever time of day it is, whoever's listening to this. But hello, my name's Hazel. I will just start by telling you a little bit about Laborie, and then I'll talk about myself, and then Paula can take over and tell you about herself. So we both work for Laborie, which is a medical technology company which is global, so we're worldwide. And we specialise in products in obstetrics, neonatal, gynecology, a little bit of urogynecology, and gastroenterology. Got to make sure I remember all of them. And our company's ethos is really about protecting human dignity, and that's really at the forefront of everything we do, with which products we cover and the training and education, everything we support. So but Paula and I's kind of passion really is probably more the obstetrics, neonatal, gynae side. So my background is as a midwife. So I qualified in the UK in 2016. I've worked in a couple of hospitals in the south of the UK, and I worked in Australia for a little while as well. So I was doing a lot of like rural and remote healthcare, which was amazing. That was definitely a highlight for me of my career. And when I wanted to look for work outside of the NHS, Laborie kind of seemed like the perfect fit for me, because a lot of the products that we have I'd use as a midwife or come across as a midwife. And it's just, we really are at the forefront of our minds is dignity and best outcomes for mums and babies. So for me, that just like sings to my heart, and I was like, yeah, this makes sense, this is a good fit. And our role essentially is as a clinical educator. So we really support the sales team, and we go out and do lots of training and education for any hospital that uses any of our products. We try and get to as many events as possible that are within this field, so anything with the Royal College of Obs and Gynae, British Intrapartum Care Society, things like that. I'm really excited to be doing this podcast. This is a new thing for us. So we just want to kind of get the word out about how we can support. Most hospitals have at least one of our products, if not almost all of them. So we just want to make sure that hospitals and users are aware of us, and how we can support them with their training and education and all those lovely things. But that's me in a nutshell.
So I'm Paula. I'm a midwife by background. I qualified in 2014, worked in the birth centre environment mainly as a community midwife, and then finished with the NHS's award manager at a hospital in the north of England. Saw this role with Laborie and see that it's an absolutely fantastic opportunity to get out there and make sure that our products are known by the professionals and are being used correctly by the professionals, and getting out there and doing all that training. So we've got really good links with the hospitals all over the country, and we absolutely enjoy ourselves, I would say.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
That's me in a nutshell. But my role is exactly the same as Hazel's, getting out there and training professionals.
That sounds fantastic. So what are these products that you provide the NHS with? What's the most popular one?
So probably in terms of the obstetric portfolio, so Laborie originally was more of a urology based company, so anything to do with sort of bladder function, things like that. But they then segued across and took over a huge obstetrics range and neonatal. So whilst we cover a bit of everything, our main kind of emphasis is on supporting the obstetrics. So things that most people have heard of, so Kiwi, for example. So if you have your baby delivered using a Kiwi device, and it's the little kind of suction cup that goes in the baby's head sometimes we could be called a vacuum assisted birth. It's an alternative to things like forceps, so it's an assisted way of giving birth vaginally. So Kiwi's massive across the world, and it's used in probably most hospitals in the UK. We've got a couple of products which are really helpful for recovery post-operative, so post C-section mainly, and that's all about, you know, increasing mobilization, reducing pain for mums and things like that. So that's something which we're really passionate about as midwives, because we have looked after mums post-op, and just, you know, when you've got a tool really help, I think it's amazing that, you know, we make sure the hospitals are aware of it. Do you want to talk a little bit about the neonatal?
Yeah, so for neonatal, we have a couple of products. So we have the Baby Lance, which most babies in the UK have a heel prick test done between 5 and 8 days postnatally. That tests for lots of metabolic disorders. So the Baby Lance is the device that will be used to create the blood spot. So it would put a slice into baby's heel and create a lovely flow of blood onto, so we get sufficient amount of blood to be able to send the test away.
I think another one actually that's really relevant to preterm birth is we've got one of our rupture of membranes tests. So it's called ROM+. So a lot of mums at some point in labour might have to have a check to see if their waters are broken, and it's not always that obvious. But obviously with preterm birth, that can be one of the things that are potentially missed, is that your waters break. It's not really obvious, it's not clear. And either mum's not realised that she's not come to hospital straight away because she's 24 weeks pregnant and isn't expecting her waters to break. Or maybe she's come to hospital and it's not been that clear to the midwives and the doctors whether it's been, you know, because it's not like it is in the film where you have this huge gush of water and you're like, oh, my waters are gone and I'm going into labour. So ROM+ is a test that checks to confirm whether your waters have or haven't broken. But it's a really useful test because it's very good at detecting rupture of membranes or waters breaking in the sort of second trimester and earlier stages of pregnancy, which is really helpful because that can be so difficult to confirm, and that would make a huge difference in terms of whether if your waters are broken in your preterm, you know, the management then to try and hopefully keep the baby in for as long as possible safely. So those are probably the key products in terms of sort of pregnancy and post-birth. And then we've got a few other products that are more related to gynae specifically, or to do with sort of bladder function and pelvic floor. So it all kind of links into quite nicely. You know, a lot of women will potentially need one of our products at some point down the line. I mean, unfortunately, you don't want anyone to need any medical help, but sometimes you do. So you want the good products to be able to do that.
They sound fantastic. And talking about premature birth, what is your experience of working with parents who've had a premature baby?
So I think as a midwife, it is inevitable, as much as we'd love premature birth to not happen. You know, it exists, and it doesn't seem like from the statistics that the numbers are going down the way that you'd want them to. So it is inevitable you will look after mums who are going into labour prematurely or have had a previous premature birth, or maybe have been identified that they might be having a preterm birth in this pregnancy. So I think you deal with it a lot in your role as a midwife. As much as you will need the neonatal team there, you'll need nursery nurses, you'll need the obstetrician, you're still very much involved in the care as a midwife. I think a lot of it is your support for the mum and the birthing partner and family as much as you can. But I think it's the first sort of experience I had of, you know, a preterm birth. I think I was like a brand spanking new midwife. My mum came into hospital, was about 26 weeks pregnant, going into labour. And this sounds so silly, but I was so shocked by how small, fragile the baby was, and nothing can prepare you for that until you see it. So I cannot imagine what it's like as a mum if you've never experienced that, just how probably scared you would be to even hold your baby, touch your baby. I remember in this situation, this baby was transferred to local tertiary hospital because of its prematurity, and they came back to our hospital relatively quickly, and I went up to the neonatal unit with a senior midwife who was there with me during the birth, and I was just amazed by the nursery nurses, the neonatologists and the team there, and how much they you know, they are so important in supporting families when they've got a preterm baby, just even giving them the confidence to hold their baby, touch their baby, do skin to skin, because you'd look and you'd see this tiny baby in the incubator and you think, I don't want to touch it, I don't want to do anything. But actually the role of healthcare professionals generally, I think in that situation is so important, whether it's the midwife, whether it's the healthcare assistant, anyone.
And I think getting that bond with a community midwife, who you'll see and postnatally, that she can be there to make sure that you're looked after. So your baby will be in the neonatal unit and well looked after. But the community midwife who you've bonded with then can make sure that you're looked after as well, because a lot of mums can get lost in the system a little bit because they're not at home, so the regular visit at home won't happen. Mums are then going to be on the unit more often. A lot of neonatal units don't have midwives that work directly with them, so that you have to liaise then with the postnatal ward for them to come round and do your check. So it's important that you get to know your community midwife really well, and that she knows where you are when you've given birth and what support you need, and she can arrange all that for you as well. But yeah, there's a lot of professionals involved, and it might be that your care whilst you're in hospital is with a midwife that you're not familiar with, but they will make sure that you get all the care that you need. And then when you're ready to be discharged home, they'll communicate with the community midwife, so she knows then she can pick you up again at home that you need as well. And any debrief, because obviously it's quite a traumatic time for you as well, they'll arrange your debrief for you, and any further counselling that you need going forward from any trauma that you've experienced. So yeah, midwives are really heavily involved. It's just we need good communication to make sure that you are looked after.
Perfect. So I suppose that's where I come in really. So I've had 2 29-week or so. My eldest boy is now 14, and then my little girl is 8. So Ollie was born 29 plus 1, and he weighed 213. And then Iris, she was 28, I think, plus 5. She was 2'3". And I suppose having a premature baby and then going on to having a second premature baby, in hindsight, I wish I would have asked more, I suppose, because it's a lot to take in, you know, when you're going into hospital and then they sit you down and they say, right, okay, so it looks like you're going to go into preterm labour, and then they sort of give you everything all at once, and it's a lot to break up, to take in, and I always wish I would have asked more questions. So I suppose as midwives, is there anything that you would advise to anybody that's listening that knows they're going to go into preterm labour, or is any risk at all? Is there anything you would advise to ask the midwives, community midwives, or any health professional really?
I think we've both got a few points, so just we'll run off a few things we've thought about beforehand, and if there's anything, Paula, just tell me to stop if you want to add. The first thing we both actually were just talking about is knowing, and I think actually regardless of whether you've had a baby before or not, it's worth having an idea of your local hospital and what service they provide, because even if it is a large hospital and they've got a labour ward or delivery suite, which is usually where you can look after more complicated women and conditions in labour, and a birthing centre or a low risk or midwifery-led unit, whatever it's called, it doesn't necessarily mean that their neonatal unit or special care baby unit can look after babies at certain gestations. So a lot of hospitals might have a 28-week and above policy. So that just means if you were to go into labour at 26 weeks, for example, the plan might be, depending on what's happening, if you're literally about to imminently give birth, usually you'll deliver at the hospital you intended to deliver at. And then you'll then need to be transferred to another hospital, which might be, you know, it might not be close to where you live at all. So I think it's just worth being mindful of that. If the hospitals do a tour, or if they do, some of them do like virtual tours and things like that, it's probably just worth asking the question. A lot of the time, by the time they do the tours, you're already sort of 6-7 months. So you might have gone past that 28 weeks marks anyway, but it's just worth being mindful of what services are offered at my hospital, what would happen if something was to go wrong, if they were to be transferred to another hospital, where is that hospital? So then you can have a little bit of a plan of the logistics of how far away is that, would I be able to go and stay with the baby, am I not going to be admitted with the baby? So I think those are things I would definitely be mindful of, and not to scare people, because obviously I don't think most people aren't necessarily thinking when they're pregnant, what do I do if I'm going to give birth preterm? Because if they've never done that before, it's probably not entering your mind. But I always think it's just worth prepared as possible. And that's my opinion anyway.
I'm going to go down that. Obviously, Claire, because you've had one preterm baby, so you were more likely to have a second. It'd be chatting about childcare, practical things like that. What family have you got available? If you are going to go into preterm labour, is your partner working away? Does he need to make arrangements with his work that you might have to leave at short notice? Lots of things like that actually you don't really start to think about until you get to like 36 weeks normally, because that's when you start to think I might go into labour at some point. But when you know it's likely to happen earlier, have your hospital bags ready. What do you need? Clothing wise, you're going to go for your tiny baby clothing rather than your newborn clothing, all the practical things like that I've seen cause women lots and lots of distress, that they've come in just for a regular antenatal checkup and actually they find out they're going to probably give birth in the next couple of days and there's nothing ready. We can help with all that. We can help you sort everything out, but it is worth always having that in the back of your mind, that you might have to be somewhere quickly and be taken out of action while your normal role. Who can take over your normal role whilst you're not available?
Yeah, I think leading on from that is what to do and who to phone in which circumstances. And I think obviously with Mama Academy, you guys are amazing with your resources for families, but we were just talking as well about the dread of, like, we've both worked community midwives and you've got your work phone, maybe you've gone on annual leave and you check your voicemail and there's a message from someone who thinks their waters are broken or maybe their baby's not moving and your stomach just falls, you just get this horrible feeling of, this was a week ago, I don't know if this woman has sought help from the hospital, I have no idea if she's okay. So I think, as a mum, you wouldn't necessarily know. You get given maybe one phone number and you just assume that's the number to phone for everything, but actually it's making sure for your hospital, and every hospital is different, so it's not always easy, but you should normally be given some sort of number of a triage or a day assessment unit or even the labour ward of who to phone. I think it's difficult as well because a lot of the time there's sort of cut-offs of before this many weeks pregnant you phone this number and after this many weeks you phone this number. But I would just say, 9 times out of 10, if you phone the incorrect number, they should be directing you to the right person to call, and there will always be 24 hours a day cover. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, if it's Christmas Day. If you think something's not quite right, we would always rather hear from a mum than a mum think it's probably nothing, I'm not going to bother them, it's a Sunday or anything like that. So it's just about knowing always I would have it saved in your mobile, because also if you think you might be in the throes of labour or something's not right, you might not feel capable to make that phone call yourself, so you need to just give the phone to your partner, your family, whoever's with you, to be like, this is the number you need to ring, because you might not be able to have that conversation yourself.
And also if you're going on holiday as well, it's really useful, even if you're not expecting to have a preterm delivery, to have the local hospitals, to do a little bit investigation about the local hospitals, because anything could happen at any time. So you'd need to know where your nearest maternity unit is, because not all hospitals have maternity units. So you could assume that you're 5 minutes away from a hospital, but actually the maternity unit is a lot longer than that. So wherever you are in the country, just make sure you know where the local hospital is to that area.
That is so helpful. What great practical tips. And here at Mama Academy, we are huge advocates of having the right number and knowing who to call and not to delay in getting assessed. If in doubt, get checked out. So that is all really, really helpful. I'm just thinking, are there any preventative measures that parents can try and take to not go into premature labour, to try and delay it as much as possible? Is there anything that can be done there?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think yes and no. So there are some things which we can talk about in kind of an overview of what you can do to try and not necessarily be at risk of premature birth. But I would just like caveat that with, it can happen to anyone. And if you do give birth prematurely or your waters break prematurely, there's absolutely nothing that you could have done differently. Or, you know, I think sometimes people want this sort of magical answer of, well, this happened because of this. But so often, you know, when people go into premature labour, there's no rhyme or reason behind it. I mean, sometimes there's an infection, or there's a reason why your body has decided that now's the time to try and give birth. But a lot of the time, I think what's really hard is, as a mum, you sort of think, should I have done something differently? Or was it because I did too much or something like that? And I've even heard it so many times. You've, like, mother-in-laws or family or friends have said, you know, well, she was doing too much and she was lifting this on the weekend, and did you see her? She was at this wedding dancing all night long. No wonder her waters broke. And it's so unhelpful as the woman, because our bodies are made to carry babies, and the majority of the time we can carry a baby to term. But if that's not the case, it's, you know, there's nothing that you can never blame yourself. So I would just say, if anyone who's listening has maybe had a preterm baby and sort of had these feelings, I think mum guilt is such a huge thing just generally, is just to remind yourself that actually it's completely out of your control. It's just something that is unfortunate has happened to you. But there are things that maybe potentially that would make you slightly more at risk, I suppose.
So NHS England have introduced, I think they're on the second version of it now, the Saving Babies' Lives pathway, which all hospitals should be using now. And basically, when you go for your first ever booking appointment, the midwife will go through a list of lots and lots of questions about you, about your background, previous pregnancies, any habits you have, any exercise you do. And it will all go into kind of a chart to calculate your risk factor of having a preterm baby. They'll give you lots of information about things you should avoid, like alcohol, smoking in pregnancy, and then any pre-existing medical conditions will also go into that calculation as well. And then the pathway that they'll map out for you then is the safest one. So it may be that you'll be referred to a consultant who will have further conversations about any concerns they've got and explain what those concerns might lead to. They'll also maybe refer you for additional scans, so we can keep an eye on how baby's growing, if the placenta's functioning well. So there's if we can get all the answers to those original questions, the initial questions, we get you on the right pathway. So that should then reduce your chance of preterm birth. It may not stop it. There's medications, so we can use progesterone, which reduces your chance of going into labour if you're known to have any issues that may cause preterm labour. They can put a suture in your cervix that will hopefully stop your cervix from opening prematurely. But at the end of the day, if your body wants to go into labour prematurely, it will go into labour prematurely, no matter what we do to put that to stop that from happening. That we can just try to safeguard and stop it from happening. And then if you do go into labour, your waters break, we'll manage it going forward from there as well. And you should be involved in all of the plans. So every doctor you speak to, they should involve you in the plans of your care and what's going to happen going forward, and you consent for all of those things to happen.
I think that just leads back to what we've been saying about the communication with, whether it's your midwife or if you've got a closer relationship with your obstetrician maybe, but just making sure that if anything's not quite right, that you do communicate it. Because things like, if you've got some symptoms which might not be clear to you that's an infection, but maybe if you spoke to your midwife about it and we'd be like, oh, that sounds like a UTI, or that sounds like something, we could get that tested, and actually, you know, we might be able to prevent certain things from happening, because infections sometimes can lead to premature birth. So I think it's just about trying to keep that avenue of communication open. I know it's not always easy, especially if you've maybe not seen the same midwife through all of your appointments. That can make it more challenging. But I think any midwife I'd speak to would always say, we'd much rather we hear from you than not hear from you. It's not a nuisance. Even if we're really, really busy, I'd much rather, you know, 9 times out of 10, any concern you have is normal, but actually we'd much rather hear from you, because if things like your waters have broken and we haven't heard from you and it's been a few weeks, it makes it much harder to try and put in these measures to try and stop labour from happening. So
and also, when you attend maternity assessment centres or triage or antenatal day units, whatever they call it, in your local trust, some women will say, you know, we'll put you on the monitor, the CTG monitor, which does a trace of baby's heart, and also you can press a button and says how often your baby moves, and they say, oh, it's moving absolutely fine now. But that is music to my ears as a midwife. That's absolutely fantastic. That means your baby's really well. I would much rather you come in and be put on that monitor and we can reassure you that everything's okay than you sit at home and worry. And actually, by the time you come to us, it is really difficult for us to do anything to support you. So always get support anytime. If you think you want, mine have gone, the midwife will tell you, you know, a few little tips. So, you know, lay down, put a pad on, see if your pad is wet later on. Come into the unit. We regularly assess sanitary towels. So don't be scared of keeping a sanitary towel to bring to the unit with you to show us it, because horrible as it sounds, that is for us, we can make a full assessment, likely, or the waters that your baby is swimming in has a certain smell, and as midwives we smell it that often that we can smell it on a pad as soon as you present your pad to us. So we can say usually, probably 8 times out of 10, yeah, that is your waters that have gone, or we might need to do further investigation while you're with us. So yeah, always save your pad if you think your waters have gone. That's a tip from me.
Yeah.
And I suppose as well with me, because I'd had Oliver early, and it was very rushed. It was preeclampsia, but I got no clue what preeclampsia is. I didn't know what it, you know, where it came from, what had I done. But then with Iris, it was a little bit different because I knew what to look out for. So with me, I actually went at 24 weeks, and that was when I was first diagnosed with preeclampsia the second time. But because I'd gone in early, I spent the rest of the pregnancy then in hospital on bed rest, but we managed to get Iris to 28 plus 5 days. So that time, those extra 4 weeks where I was under the care of the hospital potentially saved Iris's life, because had she been born at 24 weeks, it would have been a different story that I'm telling now. So even those little signs, so I had swelling in the fingers, but you know, we all think that's normal. We all think pregnancy, swelling, completely normal, but it's always best to get checked out, because in my case, it was preeclampsia. And thankfully, because I went in early, Iris is absolutely beautiful and absolutely fine. But that's because I was on bed rest. And like you guys were saying, the community midwives were absolutely amazing. They booked me straight in. They were able to constantly have the tracing on Iris, making sure her heart rate was fine. And as soon as that changed, that's when I was booked in for the cesarean. So they knew within minutes, right, okay, so something's not quite right. Now we're going to deliver. So had I not been in hospital again, you know, it would have been different. So I'm all for, you know, if in doubt, get checked out.
Yeah.
Definitely. And what was your experience like whilst you were in hospital, Claire? How often did you get to go to the NICU and see the see your baby in there? And I'd like to know what the discharge process is as well. You know, once the parent's discharged, how does that then work of getting your other children looked after, being able to go up to NICU to visit the baby? How does that work?
So it's not, you know, it's not easy. It's really not easy. You know, when you're in hospital and you're still under care of hospital, I was in and out of NICU all the time. I spent most of my days in there, most of my evenings down with Iris. And Oliver would come in and visit his sister. And I'll be honest, the NICU staff, I couldn't have wished for better care, because not only did they care for Iris, but they involved Oliver. So when Iris was born, it was Easter. So they had a little chocolate bunny and they put it under the incubator, and they said to Ollie, you know, well, your sisters brought you in with a little chocolate as well. So they were absolutely amazing in making him feel involved. However, the mum guilt of then being discharged and knowing where to spend your time, because I got a 5-year-old toddler at home, and then I got Iris, who was in hospital. And when I was with Iris, I'd felt bad for Ollie and vice versa. And it was really difficult to navigate. But once we came out of intensive care with Iris, Oliver was able to be involved a lot more. So he helped with the bathing. He had cuddles. He used to help with the feeding. And you know what? The nurses there would sit and read books with him, and they'd make him feel really, really involved. So in terms of having a NICU baby with a child, speak to the hospital, you know, let them know if you're struggling, because they're there to help, and they do help. And family, you know, getting family involved with childcare. You know, I used to do it so that the morning Oliver would come with me, and then in the afternoons I would spend with Iris then alone, because it was too much for him. It's a difficult environment for a 5-year-old to be in. In terms of being discharged from hospital, I had a cesarean section, so I was in hospital for 5 days anyway. The discharge, getting discharged from hospital for me was the most difficult part, because you feel like I've had a baby, and I know I've had a baby because I've seen my baby and I've held my baby, but I'm leaving without. And that's the hardest feeling in the world, because what you're then doing is giving the care to the NICU nurses. It's like you're giving them the baby to care for, and that's really difficult. And I'm sure Paula and Hazel would agree. It's the most difficult part of it, I would say.
Yeah, it is extreme. And from a midwife point of view, I was speaking to Hazel earlier about it. When the units are extremely busy and under a lot of stress, the mums that don't need any medical care are the ones that are asked to be discharged, basically. And it's heartbreaking for us as midwives to say, we need to discharge you home, and it's heartbreaking for you to know that you're leaving that unit without your baby, that your baby's going to stay with us. But it is a reality, unfortunately, of the service, that there may become a time, we will try to keep you on the unit as long as possible, but there may become a time where actually it's not possible that you can stay on that unit longer, especially if your baby's born at 28 weeks or 25 weeks. It could be 10, 11, 12 weeks before your baby's going home. And realistically, and I'm sure with hindsight, Claire, sleeping in your own bed, you rested much more when you were at home, you got to spend time with Ollie. Actually, for your mental health, it's much better to be at home, but the natural draw is to want to stay in hospital and be near your newborn baby. But that is one of the things when you're asking questions, is how likely am I to be able to stay in hospital with my baby, and be realistic about that it's not always the best place for you to be. Some units will have flats that are built into the neonatal unit, so you might be able to stay as a family there, but again, they'll be quite limited. So yeah, it is important to ask that question about how long can I stay, what's best for me, and do be realistic. Like I say, that it isn't always better for you to stay with us. It's usually better for you to be at home. And most units will have an unlimited visiting for parents, so that you could be there all day, all night if you wanted to be there. Not that it's good for you to be there all day and all night, but they would have unrestricted visiting for yourselves. So it's not like you'll have to go home and stay at home and come in for 2 while 4 and 6 while 8. You can actually stay there as long as you need to be there.
And I suppose as well, that's the other thing, is that you feel like you have to do everything. You know, you feel like you have to be in hospital all the time, or you have to be at home with the toddler at home all the time, and to juggle that is so difficult. And in between all that, we don't think of our own mental health. And it got to a point where I had to give myself grace for having an hour of doing nothing, or of just leaving the pots in the sink for a while, or not being able to run around the park for 2 hours straight after a cesarean section. It's hard work, and you want to be able to do everything, but you can't. It's not possible, and there has to be a time where you have to consider your own mental health, because before you know it, baby's coming home, and then that's when you start to fill that mum role with baby all the time, and you're tired and you're frustrated and you've probably done too much, and it's not a nice position to be in. So I would say use that time to rest, to get ready, and then when baby comes home, you're in such a better mindset and place to be able to give that, to give baby full care then.
Health visitor once said to me when I had my son, I mean, he's 23 now, so it's a long time ago, but she gave me some really good advice, and she said, pick your fights. Is it important that that bin is emptied today, or is it more important that actually you get to rest? Is it important that that washing is done today, or is it more important that you get to rest? And it is really, and I've taken that through all of their childhood, and as I've got older, just pick your fights and decide which is the most important thing. And most of the time it's just spending time either with your children or looking after your mental health, so that you have to be fit enough with your own mental health to look after your children. So yeah, pick your fights. It is basically what you just said, Claire. What's the most important thing at this point in time?
Yeah, it's hard work. It is hard work. And I suppose the other thing that, or the other question that I'd love to ask you guys is, so when I was in neonatal, I really struggled with medical terminology. The doctors used to come round and they always do their morning visits, and I always wanted to be there, because you get excited over, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But you get excited over the most silliest things in neonatal. You know, the first time for everything, and you're so excited about it. But I really struggled with some of the terminology that they use. So Ollie and I both had a grade 4 and 3 bleed. And I found that really difficult, because I'd go home and Google it, and I'd be like, oh no. When actually what I should have done was ask the doctors and ask the nurses. But how do you talk about medical terminology, and how can we learn more about that?
So, well, there's a big push anyway for medical professionals to not use terminology when they're speaking to patients or parents, so that we explain it as clearly as possible. I mean, sometimes we're quite direct, we'll tell you exactly what we mean, and some people wanted it a little bit more fluffy. But you should be, if you're listening to a ward round, so they are going to speak in jargon because they're speaking to each other, basically the seniors to the juniors. What I would always say is, as a midwife, when the ward rounds ended, I'd go back to my women and say, what did you understand from that? What do you want to know from that? Because actually you can Google medical terminology, but that won't explain to you why they've done that test, and actually what the results of that test were, and what the meaning going forward of the results of that test is. And that's what you want to know. Why was it done? What were the results, and what does it mean going forward? So yeah, just ask the nurse. The nurse will probably know a lot more of the jargon equally as the doctors do. And she'll have probably already picked up, as a midwife would pick up and think, she's not going to know what that means. I'm going to go back and tell her what that means. And so the good nurses will already have picked up that you need that explaining to you, but always ask them. Everybody will be more than happy to explain to you. But there is a push for us to not use it when we're in front of patients, not to use that jargon. So yeah, you can pull us up on it if you think she's just explained something to me in lots of acronyms that I don't understand, and then we'll feel really bad and explain it to you how we should have said it to you in the first place.
Yeah, I think always just ask, you know. I think quite often you'll find as well, if you've got a baby in special care baby unit or neonatal unit, if you're there for a while, you'll get to know the staff quite well. And I think naturally you'll probably find there's certain people when they're on shift, you know, you sort of like your heart sings because you're like, oh, it's Mary or whoever. And, you know, you're naturally going to, some people you just have a better rapport with and communication with. And if there is someone like that, you know, they're never going to feel bothered if you're 2 minutes of your time and can you just run through this with me. And I think as well, when you've got a premature baby, how stable they are can change so dramatically from day to day. You can have a really, really good day and they may be saying, oh, we're going to take the oxygen down, or we're going to do this. And then something can change overnight, and the next day they're back on 100% oxygen. You're thinking, what's going on? I thought we were progressing. And because it's really like a tumultuous journey. And I think that can be so hard to deal with, I would imagine, as a parent. So it's about finding someone that you have that good relationship with to sort of be like, oh, now I'm feeling, you know, a bit upset because I thought we were making progress, and actually they can say this is completely normal, this is why this has happened, and explain it to you, because they probably were there 2 nights ago on a shift and they said, oh, well, actually, do you remember when this happened? Or but I also think making sure that you're receiving the information in a way that you understand it. So sometimes we can be you know, we might just assume because someone's communicating in English really well that that's their preferred language, but actually it might be that yes, you communicate brilliantly in English, but it's not your first language. And for more complex things, you want to take it back to basics, or maybe to explain things to your family back home, it might be, actually, can I have this leaflet in another language? Or which usually we do have that resource in the NHS, but quite often it's not there unless, you know,
unless you ask
for it. So I'd say always ask, or if you've got, there are a lot of resources that can give you some nice images and ways to discuss it with younger children, for example. So if you've got a younger sibling and say, there's some really lovely books nowadays actually that you can read with your children. And so just making sure, because, you know, no one's perfect, and you think that you've explained something to someone perfectly and they might be like, were they just speaking Swedish? I've got no idea what they just said. So don't be afraid to call someone out and just say, I'm not understanding exactly what you're saying. But also, if you need someone to practically explain something to you, so to show you in the neonatal unit, for example, like the machine, so just to say, this is what this means, because I don't know if you like experience this, Claire, but whenever I would visit babies in neonatal unit, the machines are constantly beeping or they're flashing red, or it's horrific. Like it gets me, I get like PTSD. Yeah, exactly. I would always, especially as a neonatal nurse, that's not your comfort zone necessarily. You go up there, but you're not caring for those babies on a one-to-one basis. So I'd be there visiting this mum, helping her to feed, and there's the machines going like flashing red, and I'm looking around and like, do we need to do something about this? And the nurse is like, oh no, that's absolutely fine. I'm like, okay. So sometimes I think just physically being shown something to explain, you know, why do you keep muting the alarm button? And they're like, because it's absolutely fine, and this is within normal limits for your baby. And I think no one would be bothered to be asked that question. And also, if you ask the same question several times, you know, you're tired, your brain can only take in so much information. So even if you've asked the same question the day before, just ask again. I think, you know, I'd like to think most healthcare professionals are approachable. But yeah, so don't be worried if you're not getting the information you need in the format that you need it. Try and ask if you can get it in another way. And there's so many good resources nowadays online, but the Googling can be risky, I would say, from your own experience, Claire.
It is, and a really good point that you brought up as well is the journey, the neonatal journey, because it's never from A to C. It's you're going up, you're going down, and every single day is a different emotion. Those small things that you celebrate, that you can be celebrating one day, and then, like you say, you wake up the next day and their oxygen levels have gone down, or you know, they've been put in a cot, but they're not keeping their temperature, so then they have to be put back in the incubator. And I don't think that's ever talked about enough, because you do feel it can really stress you out that you're going up and down constantly, and it can feel so you know, it wasn't how it's supposed to be. We all picture taking this baby home, like, you know, the Instagram perfect life that we all want to live, and then you find you have a baby that's really tiny and really poorly, and that journey is really difficult. So being able to talk to your doctors about that, and, you know, like you say, knowing that they are there, because they're so busy, and that was my thing, is that I'd never want to bother them, because I'd always think, oh, they're just with somebody else, so I'll leave it for a little while, and then they go with somebody else, and I'd never actually ask the question. Whereas I suppose with Iris, I was very much involved and wanted to know, right, okay, so what is this, you know? And they always took the time, you know, any doctors or nurses took the time to explain it. So don't ever feel like you're bothering somebody, because they always they prefer you to ask than for you to go home, Google it, and come in the next day and being like, oh, what's happening? So yeah, to just ask. I always think that was what I was always told, is that, you know, we can be the busiest people in the world, but we'd prefer that you ask than to assume or to go and Google.
Yeah, and we always, as humans, we catastrophize everything. So you'll think one thing, you'll hear a conversation, and you think of the worst possible outcome for all of those conversations. But if you just ask a person, ask a doctor, ask a nurse, the healthcare HCA that's working on the ward that day could probably answer some of the questions, because they've been around that a long time, rather than leaving it in your head to fester. And then that's bringing you down, affecting your milk supply if you're providing milk for baby. So it's always important, actually, if you've got a question, ask it, or just write it down. I always say to my women, just write them down, and then when you have got someone's attention, you can ask all the questions in one go. It could be that your midwife could answer them for you when she's doing your postnatal check. She could probably answer a lot of those for you if you can't get anybody else's attention. But yeah, just make sure you do ask those questions, because it's not good to let them sit and stew for too long and not understand what's going on.
So thank you so much, guys, for the amazing work that you're doing. I really want to commend you for everything that you've done, and the fact that you've just written a fantastic page on our website all about caring for premature babies. It's really, really great and really helpful. How can NHS staff members contact you about the resources and the products that you mentioned earlier?
So thank you for having us, because it's
Thank
been
you.
so
Yeah, enjoyed it. Yeah.
So thank you so much for the opportunity to come and discuss. We could talk for England. We love to talk about anything to do with, women's health and pregnancy and birth. So any opportunity. The easiest way probably is literally to go on our website. So just laborie.com or Google Laborie. Generally, whichever country you're in, when you're searching, it will say, if you're searching for another country, it'll say, do you want to visit the UK site or to continue on the US site? Because they're all slightly different. There will be an inquiry form. So depending on what you want to know, so we'll be advertising, because we run a lot of webinars and things like that. So if there's something coming up, you can register your interest, or if you just generally want someone from Laborie to contact you about training or about product or a demonstration, just fill in the form and that will come across to us, and then it gets filtered through to whoever the relevant person is. You might have, in some hospitals, you might already know your Laborie rep, your representative, or you might have even been lucky enough to meet me or Paula. So if obviously you have those details, then you can reach out to us directly. But if you go via the website, we're on LinkedIn and social media and things like that. So also there's lots of information on there. And then we're trying to go to as many events as possible. So like Royal College of Obs and Gynae, when they do their World Congress, or any local intrapartum events and things like that, we quite often will have a stall or a booth there. So if you see a big green sign that says Laborie, please come and say hello and speak to us. But yeah, if in doubt, go via the website, because you'll definitely get a response there, and then we can hopefully come and visit in person and support with whatever it is that you need help with.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you for joining us today. And we're really excited to be working with you in the future. So thanks ever so much for being here, and for everyone that's listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.